Hello, everybody. So this is just to do some review practice on the shortcut method, right? We did that a little bit in class, but we didn't get to do it that much together. And there are a few of these on the midterm, so it's good just to practice it with you. So these are all, I'm going to do 5 of them. They're all going to be on Canvas, just as a list for you to practice on, and then you can sort of check your answer along to this video. Okay, so what we're doing, just in case you've completely forgotten, right, is we're checking for validity. Validity is a matter of if the premises are true, does the conclusion logically have to follow, right? Is it a valid inference from the premises to the conclusion? That's what we're trying to figure out. So what we do is we try to look for the gremlin, right? The gremlin is that logical possibility where the conclusion is false and somehow the premises can be true. If that's the case, then we know it's not a valid argument, because in valid arguments, that's just logically impossible. Right? So our first step is always going to be to focus on that logical possibility where the conclusion is false. Right? So we're just going to make it false. We know that that's one of the logical possibilities, right? We don't know if P is true or false, but it's possible that it's false. Right? So then once we have that truth value locked down, if it's the truth value of a whole statement, a whole premise or a whole conclusion, then I'll circle it. Right? This is just a simple statement, a variable. And then I'm going to transfer that value to all the p's over here. So we just have one p right here. I'm not going to circle it because this is the whole premise, this disjunction. Right? This is just one of the disjuncts. So then the next step is always going to be, well, given that we've assigned this truth value to the conclusion and this truth value to this variable, can we make all the premises true? If we can, then it's invalid, obviously, right? So always look for forced choices first, things that can only be true or false in one way. Well, true, of course, because we're trying to make all the premises true. And there's a really easy candidate, not Q, right? We can just go ahead and put a T right underneath of it. Right? We could have also gone for this one. If we're trying to make this true, we could just make this true since this is false, and at least one side of the disjuncts has to be true in order for a disjunction to be true. But this is simpler, right? So we can just go not Q is true. We've made that premise true. And of course, if not Q is true, then Q has to be false. And then as soon as we have a variable truth value locked down, we got to transfer it over to all the other cases of that variable, in this case Q, right? And like that. Right? So now we've got our conclusion false, one of the premises being true, and then we're going to see if we can make these premises true, given the truth values that we've given the variables so far. Right away, you can see right here, false, right? We can't even get us, we don't even need to evaluate this one. Given these truth value assignments, this first premise has to be false. So we're done. It's a valid argument. We can't make the premise, the conclusion true and the premise is false. It's just not possible. We try to do it, right? We make P false, and then we make this premise true. But as soon as we make this premise true, that means that this premise is going to be false. Right? So there's just no way to do it. So that means we did not find a gremlin, and this argument is valid. Okay, good. And now I'm going to pause it so I can put up the next one, and hopefully this will just be uninterrupted for you. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. There we go. Can you see that okay? There's a little bit of a glare. This is saying A and B, right, a conjunction. If B, then not C. Therefore, the conclusion, not C. Yeah. Now I can already tell that this should be valid because this basically has the form of a modus ponens, right? Because this is saying if B then not C. Well, A and B is saying B, right? So if B then something else, B therefore that's something else. Yeah. Well, if you don't get that, don't worry about it. We'll just do this the regular way. First step, right? Make that conclusion false, right? Nothing is constraining us one way or the other. We can just explore that logical possibility where the conclusion is false. And now, remember, the conclusion here is the whole statement. So we're no longer dealing with a simple variable. We're dealing with a negation, right? So the negation is what we want to make false. That's the whole conclusion. And it just happens to be that if that conclusion is false, then C has to be true. And so then we'll need to transfer that truth value over right away to over here. And now we just try to make the premises true. Okay? No, there's nothing, no constraint on A and B yet, right? C doesn't enter into it, so we can do whatever we want with that. Of course, there's only one way for a conjunction to be true, right? Both sides of the conjunction have to be true. So we can just make A and B true in order to make this first premise true. That's the only way to do it. So now we have a truth value locked down for B. Boom. So now, in order to figure out the truth value of this whole conditional here, we just have to switch the truth value of C because it's a negation right there. So what we have is a conditional with a true antecedent and a false consequent. And if you look at your truth tables, you would realize that this is the only time that a conditional is false. All right, so I have to put false. All right. Given that we gave C the truth value of T, right, that means that this whole negation here, the consequent has to be false, but we also had to make B true in order to make this premise true, so we ended up with a true antecedent and a false consequent, making this whole thing false. So we did not find a gremlin. The argument is valid, just as I predicted. Okay, I'm going to pause it again. Okay, here we are. Okay, so this one's getting a little trickier. Be happy that I'm not making you do brackets. We could have gone way more complicated with this than I usually do, but given our situation, I think we can keep this pretty light. So let's look at this one right here. We have three premises, and the conclusion is a conditional. It's kind of a weird conditional because it's saying if A, then not C. Right? And we don't need any brackets for that, but it's a little bit complicated, like brackets, but we're just leaving them out. We just don't need it. This is the antecedent is A, the consequent is not C. Okay, so what we want to do is to make that whole conclusion false. Right? There's no reason we can't at this point. If you look at your truth tables, or if you just remember at this point, hopefully, when is a conditional false? There's only one way to make a conditional false, and we just saw that in the last one as well, right? You get a true antecedent and a false consequent. That's what will make it false. So we've got a truth value for A locked down, so let's transfer that value right away. And we know that not C is false, so C is going to have to be true. So let's transfer that truth value to right here for T. Okay, or C rather. My ampersands are terrible. I think that made it worse. Oh well. Okay, so now what do we need to do to make these premises true? Well, it's pretty easy. The first premise is already true, right? Just by stipulating that the antecedent is true over here, which is an A over there. Then any of them, really, they're all forced choices. And statements are the easiest because both sides have to be true. We all know that to make any kind of and statement. For that statement to be true, both things you said have to be true. Right? So if we're going to make this premise here true, then we better assign a true to B. Right? In which case, we'll transfer that truth value right over here. And what do we get here? A conditional with a true antecedent and a true consequent. That is going to be true. So, circle that one. What do we got here? We found a gremlin, right? TTTF. That means for this logical form, the structure that this argument has, it's logically possible to get true premises and a false conclusion. That's bad, makes the argument invalid. Okay, here's a much simpler one, just for fun. Let me make that a little bit more visible. This is one of those ones where I can look at it and see that this is pretty much a disjunctive syllogism. A disjunctive syllogism is P or Q, not P, therefore Q. Well, here one side is saying not P, and here we're saying P. So it's negating this, which means you only have Q left, right? So I can already tell it's valid, but let's do the shortcut method here. First step first, a good way to do it. Make that conclusion false, transfer over the truth value, and then see if we can make the premises true. Right? Very easy to do when you have just the variable. We'll just say true. Circle that. All right, circle that. I'm going to transfer over that truth value to right here. We know that the right side of the disjunct is false. Now the left side, we don't know yet. We just have the truth value for P, but the left side is not P, right? So then if you know what a negation does, it just flips the truth value like that, right? Which means that we have a disjunction with two false disjuncts, which makes the whole thing false, right? So we could not stipulate this as being true and then fill these out as, sorry, we could not stipulate the conclusion being false and then get all the premises to be true. It wasn't possible. We didn't find a gremlin. That's a good thing. This argument is valid. Okay, and here is the last one. Okay, hopefully this is not going too fast. You're following along. You get the basic idea. Yeah. What we need to do here, make this false, right? And put the F right underneath the operator. Circle that. When is a disjunction false? Well, it's true as long as at least one side is true. So if the whole thing is false, both sides have to be false. So we're going to put an F for P and an F for S. And then transfer those values over. Put the F under the P and put the F under the S, wherever it appears. Okay. Then we got to try to make those premises true. Let's see if we can do it. We could start with any of them. It doesn't really matter for this one. There's not a super easy or forced choice necessarily. Let's just start with this one right here. Well, that is actually a forced choice right away, right? Because in order to make this whole thing true, at least one side has to be true. So Q is going to have to be true if I want this first premise to be true, which I do. So what we're trying to do, we got a truth value locked down. So let's put a T right here. And now let's see, what do we want to do? Well, we've got all the truth values that we need to figure out the truth value of the third premise here. It's got a true antecedent and a false consequent, which you all know now, right? It means the whole thing is false. Okay, so we can really stop right there. Yeah, I tried to make the conclusion false and the premise is true, right? I started with making this whole thing false. That means that P and S have to be false. Then if I assign that truth value to the P over here, I realize that I'm going to have to make Q true to make this premise true. Of course, if I make Q true, then we've got a conditional here with a true antecedent and a false consequent. So there's just no way to make all the premises true consistently. That means we did not find a gremlin, right? A gremlin, again, is all true premises and a false conclusion. We tried to find it, we could not. Right? So this argument is valid. It's a valid argument form. Okay, that's it. I hope that was helpful. Let me know by email or whatever other way. Maybe I can open up some sort of discussion underneath this thing. I'll see what I can do about that. Maybe I'll post it as a discussion with an optional sort of involvement thing for you in case you have questions. Okay, that's it for now. I'll be back at some point today or tomorrow to start presenting categorical logic. So we'll leave all this behind very, very soon, and we'll move on to something different, something a little more visual. Some of the people that don't like this might like categorical logic better. We'll see. All right, have a good day.